From the field to the film room to the war room. The road to the draft, shall we say, ends right here on BGN Radio. Welcome to the BGN Draft Show, everybody. This is our last episode coming out to you before the NFL Draft that will be on Thursday, Friday, Saturday of this week. BGN Radio will be live during night one of the draft, so you guys can come and check out their content here. Deibs, Mark, and I will be live for all of day two of the draft as well. So if you guys want to come check us out, we'll be doing that as well. We'll also all be back next week after the draft to break down everything, our thoughts on how the Eagles performed. Maybe we'll touch on the other NFC East teams as well. But today, as promised, we have been through a positional breakdown for every position in the draft. Today, we're going to talk about my guys. This is the My Guys podcast. We've each got 5 guys that we are considerably higher on or lower on than the rest of than the other 2 guys. And so we're going to talk about why, how we've evaluated some of these players differently, why we've evaluated them differently, and maybe we'll break out into a few arguments as well. But I'm joined, as I have been for every episode of this BGN Draft Show, by my co-host for Chalk Talk. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. Be sure you check out his radio show, the Tough Cover Radio Show, every Saturday. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. We aired all of the positional previews in the second hour the last few weeks in the Tough Cover Radio Show to get the information to the people because we've been grinding, and it feels like this is the week where it pays off. We get to do the live show. We get to talk about the picks. We get to say who's wrong, say who's right, the recap shows. I'm absolutely pumped. One of my favorite weeks of the year.
All right. And we are also joined, again, as we have been every week, by Deibs. Give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. You can check out his podcast, Party on Broad. Deibs, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing well, man. It's Christmas week, as everyone here. There's nothing better than NFL draft week. It's bittersweet for me because I've been doing this since last summer. As much as I love it, it's kind of emotional when it ends because I love it so much. But we'll be back at it in May covering the 2024 draft.
All right. It's getting an earlier start than ever before this year, and it's great. Yeah, it's always a little sad because there's players you become attached to that you know the Eagles aren't going to draft, but it becomes official on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So, but we'll cope, and maybe one. I loved Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in the draft, and I wanted the Eagles to draft him so bad. And finally, 5 years later, he ended up an Eagle for a year. So maybe we'll live out those dreams sometime in the future as well.
2 things on that. The fun thing is Deibs is a little bit less NFL focused than me and Shane are. He's much more Eagles focused, and because we just talked about it, he gets the jump on us with the scouting early on during the college football season in a way that me and Shane, we just don't do as well as Deibs does. Nobody does. So he almost does really say goodbye to these players. Like if they're not on the Eagles, Deibs isn't thinking about them. So me and Shane, at least, like, we go back and forth. And then, because I'm a better football fan than Shane, even though he likes to pretend like he's the only football fan, I'm a true fantasy nerd. So these guys become a huge part of my life as a gambler and a fantasy guy. So I don't have to say goodbye quite as much as you guys do.
Yep.
Fantasy football's a travesty. Fantasy football's a travesty.
Oh my God.
Okay, so let's dive into it. We've each got 5 guys that were considerably higher or lower on than consensus. This draft spreadsheet that we're using to compile all this, it'll go out on Twitter later this week, so you guys can track along during the draft with our big boards if you want to. But we're going to dive in here. We're going to start with one of the guys that's been deemed my guy. It is cornerback Deonte Banks out of Maryland. He comes in at number 19 on my big board. He is 35th for Mark. He's 58th for Deibs. So his consensus rating on our big board is 37th, but I have him at 19th. So that officially makes him one of my guys. And I love Deonte Banks. If I'm being honest, I think Deonte Banks is going in the first round of this draft. I don't know if you guys think he's going to go in the first round and you just view him a little lower, but I think he's absolutely going in the first round. His athleticism, like his physical profile, obviously I'm a relative athletic score guy, but he's a 10.0 relative athletic score. And this isn't Tariq Woolen, who's really raw, who he still never should have fallen as far as he did based on his athleticism. But when you can get a guy that's this athletic, and he's not just this super raw guy. Like he looks good on film. He's strong at the catch point, a good tackler, all of those things. I think the biggest thing for him is just his lack of collegiate starts and his lack of exposure playing at Maryland. Obviously, 2020, he only played 3 games with the COVID shortened season. And then in 2021, he only played 2 games with a shoulder injury. So 2022 was really his first big exposure, and it was for Maryland. And so I really think if Deonte Banks played in the SEC or if he played in the Big Ten, I think he would have gotten more exposure, and I think a lot more people would know his name. But I feel pretty strongly that Deonte Banks is going at the end of the first round. I don't know. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think he is going to go the first round? You just have him a little lower, or do you think he's more of a second round guy?
I think he's fringe. Like, I think it could go either way. Like, I think if he goes, it'll be in the 20s, or maybe in the back, the last couple of picks. I don't think he'll go in the top 20. Maybe I'm wrong there, because I do think there is a lot of corners in this draft. Yeah, I think you hit on it. It's the lack of tape more than anything. In a pretty deep DB draft, there isn't as much tape out there. The ball skills aren't evident. He only had 1 pick throughout his career there, I think. So it's not like a guy that wowed me on tape. But when you talk about the athleticism, this is a guy who I probably had in my 50s going into the combine, maybe. So this is a guy who I've propped up because of those traits that he's shown throughout the process. But I have him at 35. It's not like we're talking about a guy I don't like. I think he definitely has a lot of upside. My comparison is to poor man's Marshawn Lattimore, because he's a pretty direct athletic comp to Marshawn Lattimore. If he turns in an 85% career of Marshawn Lattimore's, good years, that's a pretty good player. But yeah, it's just he's not great in press, and there's not a ton of tape. So those are really the only issues there with him.
Yeah,
all right.
I'd definitely lean towards day 2 for Deonte Banks. He's just in a crowded group when you talk about Clark Phillips, Emmanuel Forbes, Cam Smith. That's where I would put those guys above him. And if you're including defensive backs like a Sidney Brown, guys like that, I think he falls. And I like Deonte Banks. I would even argue maybe even DJ Turner could go above a guy like that. So for me, I think he's just going to fall. If there is a chance that, as I talked with Mark Schofield on our cornerback show, that there are so many cornerbacks, there's like a rush of cornerbacks in that mid to late first round that teams will just jump on getting a guy like Deonte Banks. So there is a chance, but very low chance. I think he's a day 2 guy.
Yeah, that is one thing. It is, for as weak as this class is overall in a lot of areas, it is very deep at cornerback. So that can push some guys down the board. So, okay, let's pivot here. We're going to talk about one of Mark's guys now. And that is wide receiver Jalin Hyatt out of Tennessee. Mark has him at 23 on his big board. Dibes has him at 41. I'm at 52. So our consensus ranking is 41. Mark is considerably above that at 23. Dibes is right there, and I'm considerably below that. So Mark, Hyatt, your comp for him is Deshaun Jackson. So talk to me about Jalin Hyatt and why you're so high on him.
Yeah, there's a lot of Deshaun there. There's a lot of Will Fuller there as well. Definitely a burner. At the beginning of this process, I didn't expect to be this Jalin Hyatt super fan who was much higher than, honestly, you guys can tell me. I look at a lot of ranks across the draft industry. I haven't seen anyone else have Hyatt as high as I do. And in the past, that might have made me question myself. But I keep looking at Hyatt, and there's a chance that I'm being a prisoner to the moment of October, where Hooker and Hyatt lit up the college football world, and against Alabama and others. This guy put up 6 catches for 207 yards and 5 touchdowns against an Alabama secondary that will have a first-round pick in Brian Branch and a day 2 pick in Eli Ricks. He may have only had 67 catches on 89 targets, but they were loud. 1,267 yards and 15 touchdowns. And this isn't a guy who is a bad athlete or something. I understand that there's a concern about the size, but those size is factored into relative athletic score. And this guy had a 9.49 relative athletic score, and he didn't even run nearly as fast as people were expecting to see him run. but tape doesn't lie, and he has football speed in a way that you don't see very often. Deshaun Jackson, Will Fuller type speed down the field. 4.4 is really underselling how fast this guy can be down the field. People that are low on Jalen Hyatt love to point out that he hasn't dealt with press coverage, and I know that Shane has some concerns about that. My answer to that has always been good luck covering Jalen Hyatt's speed and press coverage without help over the top. And if you're getting help over the top on Jalen Hyatt, then you've already won the game. Like, that's the point. You're either taking two guys out of the play or you're defending a guy in press who's way too fast to defend in press. He won't have to deal with it much, in my opinion, because it's just a foolish strategy against him. People will point out that he was used in uber-specific ways in Josh Heupel's scheme. I point out that Josh Heupel's not the only genius who knows that he's fast. Other people will be able to figure out that Jalen Hyatt's fast and can be used in interesting ways. People will point out his size, and the last thing I'll say is, just like I do with Bryce Young, just like I will with Emmanuel Forbes, just like I did with Devontae Smith, I'm more forgiving with size concerns when it comes at the highest level in the SEC. And that's where I'm at with Jalen Hyatt. I think he's a no doubt first-round pick, and don't let Kansas City get their hands on them get their hands on him at 31.
Yeah, when I did a mock draft that I put on Twitter the other day, how the first round would play out if I was the GM for every team, what I would do. And Jalen Hyatt was the Chiefs pick at 31 or 32, if you want to call it 32, however you want to litigate the Dolphins pick being forfeited. And it was over some guys that I have ranked higher than him in my rankings. He's just such a perfect fit for Kansas City. So, I mean, yeah, Mark hit my concerns. I'm just more concerned there than he is. Dibes, do you want to add anything in on Jalen Hyatt? And then we'll talk about one of your guys here.
When you talk about fit with the Philadelphia Eagles, I mean, you talk about replacing Quez Watkins in the slot. That's the biggest question mark, his route running and what he does 15 yards in. Everybody knows what he can do with vertical routes, and he's arguably the best downfield threat in this draft. He squashed all of those, naysayers at the combine saying he is a plus route runner and things like that. But we just don't have a lot of evidence to support that. I'm really high on Jalen Hyatt. He was my number 5 wide receiver in this draft. I saw a mock today having him go to the Eagles at number 30. Would I be upset about that pick? Probably not. I think they could do a lot worse at number 30. There are some question marks, but like Mark said, when you're performing at that level in the SEC and just dominating, and he looked so much faster than his combine time on tape. I mean, he's legit. He's a legit talent.
Put him at wide receiver 3 for the Eagles and send him deep every play and force teams to either dealing with him deep or AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert. Like, yeah. I love the fit at wide receiver 3. Even he might not be the prototypical underneath slot receiver guy. I don't know how much you need that when you have Kenny Gainwell, you have Dallas Goedert, and you have Smith who can kill you on the inside as well. So I think you could make Jalen Hyatt's speed work in this Eagles offense.
All right, let's go to one of Dibes' guys. It is center John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota. Consensus, he is 35 on our big board. Dibes, you have him up at 17, well above consensus. So talk to me about John Michael Schmitz.
All right. I mean, you have to start with, this is a generally weak draft. So normally, I wouldn't even go like this, but in this draft, the sure things, the high floor guys get bumped up just a little bit for a lot of these guys. And John Michael Schmitz has an incredibly high floor. This is a guy who he was the highest graded center in college football last year. Amazing size, 6'4". He's a little bit old for the position. He'll be 24. He just turned 24, actually. But power, body control, football IQ, all of those variables suggest that this is one of the premier plug and play starters from day one in the NFL. He's not the most athletic interior offensive lineman, but I think he is the most pro ready. So you look at this guy, he's allowed 2 sacks, 5 hurries, 1 quarterback hit on 767 offensive snaps in his career. He hasn't seen a single snap outside of center, but I think he's got the athleticism to kind of fill in at left guard or right guard if he has to. He's a versatile run blocker. experience playing in both man gap and zone blocking schemes. You look at Minnesota, they were a run first, run heavy offense that had a very diverse running game that mixed in a variety of techniques. So I think this guy is a major competitor. He's a reliable pass protector. He's got really good footwork. I think in a draft that really struggles to have a lot of guys that can play from day one, especially in that mid to late first round area and day two, where there's a lot of developmental projects and toolsy guys all over the board. John Michael Schmitz is a sure thing, and I don't know why people are sleeping on him. I think he's a real deal talent. I get positional value, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's one of those things where there's the evaluation of a player, and our evaluations of John Michael Schmitz are the same. High floor, plug and play center, but our valuation of that player at that position is what's different. So for me, I don't disagree with anything you said about John Michael Schmitz. I'm just generally lower on a center than you are. And I was higher than anybody on Creed Humphrey the year that he came out and Kansas City drafted him. And I still didn't have, I wouldn't have taken Creed Humphrey that highly. So I'm with you on what you think of John Michael Schmitz. I just can't put a center that high on my board is ultimately where that one comes down for me.
Yeah, I don't think he's like a Creed Humphrey level. I don't think he's going to be a Creed Humphrey level center also. Like, I don't see him getting to the second level as an athlete, like a Jason Kelsey or like the truly, truly elite centers out there. But I think he's a plug and play guy. Like, I compared him to Ben Jones, which might sound like a lot of people are going to be like, oh, who's Ben Jones? He's been like a pretty decent starter for a pretty long time. Like, I think that's how I look at John Michael Schmitz. Like, I think he'll plug in, and I think he'll be a pretty average to above average center. And I think he'll be that from day one. And a lot of the time I've said I'm more forgiving on positional value, and I'm willing to rank running backs and safeties and interior linemen higher than others. But when it's just a center who can't play guard, I struggle with that a little bit. So when there's guys who can move around on the offensive line and the interior line, I'm generally a bit higher on those types of guys. But John Michael Schmitz, I mean, he's a lock to go in the first 2 rounds and in the first 60 picks, in my opinion, and he can start right away.
All right, let's go on to my second guy is Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC, and you can call him an interior defensive lineman. You could call him an edge. You can call him whatever you want. I'm 37th on him. Our consensus big board has him at 53 overall. I don't know how you're going to use Tuli Tuipulotu at the next level. I think he could be I think he could play inside or outside in a 4-3. I think he could be a D end in a 3-4. He cut a lot of weight in 2022 and got a lot more athletic, and he led the NCAA in tackles for loss and sacks. So he's a highly productive player. He's explosive off the line. He's got a lot of pass rush tools in his toolbox, but he's an ultimate tweener player. Like, I wouldn't trust him as a pure edge rusher. I don't think he's got the bend to win there consistently. Ultimately, I feel like you have to have a plan for Tuli Tuipulotu. He's either going to have to commit to like bulking back up to be an early down player and sacrifice that athleticism, or I think he's got to stay trim and athletic and be a late down player. I'm not sure he can be a 3 down player. And so there's a lot of flexibility there. There's a little bit of something for everybody, depending on what you want to make him. But I'm very aware that a lot of times those players don't pan out. And so he's an intriguing athlete who has a lot of production in the college level. It's going to be more important for him than any non-quarterback probably in this draft, the scheme that he lands in, the team he lands with, and how they choose to use him, because that's going to make or break Tuli Tuipulotu's career, in my opinion. So I'm a little higher on him just because I think he can appeal to a lot of teams, but you're going to have a well-defined plan for what you want him to do.
Yeah, I have in my scouting report I could be way too high on Thule or way too low on Thule, and I have him at 61. So I can understand pretty much any ranking on him. He's a tweener. I always kind of struggle with tweeners on the defensive line, and I struggle with guys who I don't know if they can play 3 downs. I always prop up guys who can and kind of penalize guys who I'm not sure if they can. So that's where I'm at on Thule. I could be way too low or too high on him.
All right.
I don't buy it. I mean, the exact opposite of a John Michael Schmitz. Like, this guy is going to need a defensive coordinator that can get creative, attack those mismatches, use that guy on, passing downs, things like that. I get really worried about this guy's draft stock. I would be shocked if he's drafted round 2, round 3. I could see it happening. But I could definitely also see him falling to day 3 because of the tweener. I think it's more of a negative than a plus on my end.
All right, let's keep rolling here. Mark's number 2 guy is safety Antonio Johnson. He is number 25 on Mark's big board. He is number 44 on our consensus big board. So, Mark, what do you like so much about Antonio Johnson?
Yeah, it's probably a little bit of a departure from the rest of my list because he's not as much of a freak athlete as the other guys. This is my tape guy. This is like my guy that jumps off the screen on tape for me. It's less of a bet on athleticism, but he is freakishly big for safety at 6'2", 200. This is a big guy. 4'5", 240, pretty solid for a safety. Really, really good PFF grades in both 2022 and 2021. Good in run defense in terms of PFF grades and good in coverage. 2-year starter, 3-year contributor. Played slot corner his first 2 years starting in Texas A&M. Definitely versatile, which always helps with me. I think he can bounce back and forth a little bit. And I do think he's got the size and traits to be a true safety, but he can play nickel corner, can even play dime linebacker in some packages. He plays great against the run. He's masterful at defending screens, huge tackle radius, crazy burst. You'd like to see more plays on the ball, but you'd think you'd see that more at safety, which he hasn't played as much of as he has at cornerback. The NFL comp side make for him, I would throw Jesse Bates out there. He's a pretty exact athletic and size comp to Jesse Bates, who played on the Bengals for a while and just signed for big money with the Falcons. Really, really good player. We need to improve his ball skills. Jesse Bates has really, really been a good ball production guy at safety in the NFL, but Bates wasn't that in college. So it's proven that it can be traits can prove out in the NFL that haven't in college. So I think Johnson's a guy who can play right away. I think he's got the ability to grow. He's got the ability to improve. People have compared him to Rayshon Jenkins. People have compared him to Adrian Phillips. I've seen Adrian Amos. There's been a lot of comparisons out there for Antonio Johnson. But then I feel like most mocks he's late second round. PFF, I think, has him in the 60s, even though they grade him out so highly. I don't really understand what I'm missing and what I'm supposed to be lower on Antonio Johnson for. Is it just that I'm, in general, higher on safeties? I don't know.
Perhaps is athleticism, maybe as well. The 5.41 relative athletic score. I like Antonio Johnson. I am a little concerned about his athletic profile, how that works, how that translates. My fear with Johnson is that he's going to end up needing to be a guy that's in the box. And so that limits your value if he's limited there. And I'm not saying he will be, but that's my bigger concern with Johnson. That's why I have him a little further down than you do.
Yeah, that's what it is, Shane. I think this is one of the premier safety linebacker hybrids in this draft. I think he's definitely a round 2 guy. I agree, Shane. I think he thrives in the box. I'm a little worried about his coverage skills. Being a center fielder in that backfield, that's probably not the best way to get the most out of this guy's talent. But he's a very smart football player in the right system. I could definitely see him thriving. So round 2 guy for me.
I'd love to see him in this system in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Okay, let's go.
Not falling in love with the safety. Nope.
Second round. How he took Nate Allen. How he's taken safeties in the second round. Jaquan Jarrett.
Just fall in love with a safety, and then in 4 years, when the team that drafts him gets sick of him, they'll trade him to Howie for a 5th round pick.
Yeah.
That's your best chance. So, all right, let's go to Dibes' number 2 guy. It is linebacker Trenton Simpson out of Clemson. Dibes has him as 26 on his big board. Overall consensus has him at 38 between the three of us. Dibes, talk to me about Trenton Simpson. What's so intriguing about him?
It's a really bad linebacker class, and maybe it's just me because I overvalue linebackers that thrive in coverage. But he's one of the premier guys, and especially in a class that doesn't have a true star, a guy that has upside of being a star at the next level. I think Trenton Simpson absolutely checks that box. Freak athlete, 6'3", 240 pounds, 4.43 second 40-yard dash at the combine. He's a guy that can thrive in the box. He has sideline to sideline range. Checks off a lot of boxes in coverage. He's a really good blitzer, had 31 pressures and 7 sacks in 2022. When Clemson lined him up against slot receivers, he only allowed 18 catches and 144 yards across 28 targets. Trenton Simpson, again, is a guy that has really nice upside. I think he has the instincts to fall back in coverage and pass defense, and that's the number one thing I like about this guy in a class that doesn't have a lot of them. So if you're talking about a surefire impact starter from day one, Trenton Simpson's not that guy. Let's be honest. He's got a lot of work. He needs to be coached up at the next level. But for me, I think it's just a matter of finding the right role for Trenton Simpson, finding the right coordinator to kind of coach him up. He's a bit of a project, but I think his athleticism, his coverage skills, potential coverage skills, and his versatility, I think the talent is there to develop. So I'm surprised I'm the highest on Trenton Simpson, but I could definitely see him getting selected in the back end of round 1.
Yeah, I'm surprised you're the highest for him as well, because Mark's comp for him is Jeremiah Usakoromoa, a guy that Mark absolutely loved. I believe he was a top 10 player in that draft. So, Mark, you see some JOK in Trenton Simpson. Why so low? Why do you have him down in the 40s?
I think it's he just doesn't have the same freakish athleticism. He's 9.84 RAS, so that says a lot. I think he's got different athleticism. I don't think he's quite as quick twitch as JOK was, but more than anything, I don't think he's got great ball recognition skills. So I think that is what the difference is between him and JOK, where JOK was, a slot corner at times at Notre Dame. They just used JOK in so many ways. Trenton Simpson was used in a lot of ways, but not nearly the variety of ways that JOK was. So I do like Trenton Simpson a lot, though. He's freakishly long arms, freakishly big hands, definitely runs a really fast 40. So he's got a ton of athleticism, but he weirdly seems to lack in some areas of awareness. I think a lot of the issues I have with Simpson are based on tape. I love the idea of Trenton Simpson. The idea of Trenton Simpson is definitely tantalizing.
Yeah. All right, let's keep rolling here. We'll go to our third, my guys. For me, it's going to be running back Tank Bigsby. I have him at 69th on my big board. He's my running back 4 in the class. Our consensus big board has him at 86. And Tank Bigsby, beyond just having the best name ever for a running back, he lives up to his name, like powerful north-south runner. He's always falling forward. Now, the reason people don't like Tank Bigsby is his 4.58 40, which was 40th percentile. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter. Like, I am the RAS guy, and this is the position it does not matter for. Every year, people fall in love with the running back that lights up the combine, and it just doesn't matter. And so to prove it, I'm going to start reading to you the top RAS scores from 2019 to now for running backs. We've got Kini Nwagu from 2021, Iowa State, Rashad White, Jeremy Cox. Stop me when we get to someone that's been decent. Chris Evans, Master Teague III, Xander Horvath. These are real people. Zamir White, Alex Barnes, Charlie Volker, Jake Funk, Bryant Kobach, Ty Johnson, Trey Sermon, Kyle Borsa, Maurice Berkey. And then we get to Jonathan Taylor and it dies out. But the main thing is
Trey Sermon.
Yeah. The main thing is, like, people love the Devon A chains and the Tajay Spears that can go run a 4.3 40, and it just doesn't matter for running backs. It rarely matters. It rarely translates to success. So, yes, he's not the fastest guy, and that's why people don't like him. His 10-yard split was a 1.54, which is 70th percentile. He's got enough burst to make it work. And so I'm in on the Tank. I'm in on him. I would love to see Tank Bigsby in the Eagles backfield on a day 2 pick. I like a running back that can run a guy over, and the Eagles, they have that if Rashad Penny stays healthy. Outside of that, they don't have it. I like Tank Bigsby. You guys don't, though. You're haters. You're drinking the haterade. Mark Dibes disrespectfully has him outside of his top 100 at 112. Dibes, what's going on, man?
There's just running backs I like more.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Like his ability to plant his foot and change direction is one of the best in this class. That's what he's really good at. He's a physical runner, tough runner, good power, good straight line speed. Definitely has the upside of being a potential 3-down starter. And like what we talked about during our running back show, I watched a lot of Tank Bigsby. He looked like the best player on offense most of the time at Auburn. So I don't know. Maybe it's just because the Zach Charbonnets of the world, the Devin A. Chains, even Rashawn Johnson, even the idea of a Rashawn Johnson over Tank Bigsby. I can't explain it.
All right. Well, let's move on to Mark's number 3 guy. It is edge rusher Derek Hall, also out of Auburn. Mark has him at 41. He is 62 on our consensus big board. Mark, talk to me about Derek Hall.
Derek Hall's a guy I've been hearing is rising up boards a little bit. There's been some visit talks with him in the back end of the first round, potentially. Derek Hall's a guy who I really, really like, and this is another tape guy for me, but he is also an athlete, 9.24 relative athletic score. Shane's an RAS guy, besides when he's being a hater like he is on Derek Hall. Elite in the 40 at 4.55, elite in the 10 and 20-yard dash, elite in the broad jump, very good in the vertical, incredibly long arms. This is a guy who had 18 sacks over the last 2 years with 53 hurries over the last 2 years, 74 hurries over the last 3 years, a deadly first step. He gets on you quick. One of the highest motors in the entire class. Sideline to sideline speed, total gamer, definite dog mentality, as Nick Sirianni would say. He was a team captain at Auburn. Don't hold that against him, though. Solid against the run, but it seems like he has the traits to become a great run defender. He's not going to provide much in the way of interior versatility, but he should be able to handle any role outside of the tackles. He's very, very similar athletically and physically to Carl Lawson, a very solid pass rusher for the Jets, formerly of the Bengals, also formerly out of Auburn. This was a former three-sport athlete who started in basketball and track as well, 4-star prospect coming out of high school. So Derek Hall, I feel like, is a guy who we just haven't heard nearly enough about throughout the process. And I think you can chalk that up similarly to Dibes talking about Bigsby in the running back class and how there's a lot of options. There's even more in the edge class. So it's easy for guys to go under the radar. Adibawara is a guy who's probably went under the radar for me. I probably have him too low. But I think that way about Hall for a lot of people. I think people are too low.
All right. Dibes, on to your guy here. It is offensive lineman Andrew Voorhees at USC. You have him at 49 on your big board. Mark and I did not have him in our top 100. So tell me what you like so much about Andrew Voorhees. I was surprised when we were looking at these lists that you ended up still having him that high.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about talent, that's where I have him on the big board. I know. Let's talk about why he's going to fall. But Andrew Voorhees is one of the most experienced players in this class. Played nearly 3,500 snaps in 6 years, 5 years, either as a full-time starter or starter for most of the season. Has only given up 11 career sacks. Really great size, 6'6", over 320 pounds, immense base, ridiculous power, ridiculous strength, can absorb blows, stay attached to blocks, man. This guy's an incredible competitor. He competed on the bench press despite tearing his ACL at the combine and still outperformed the offensive line group with 38 reps. I think he's a scheme diverse player. He's comfortable with a lot of different concepts, just elite versatility. Again, he's played an insane number of snaps, 400 plus at each the left tackle, left guard, and right guard. The biggest concern here for Voorhees is that torn ACL that he suffered at the combine. It was reportedly a clean tear, and is likely going to delay his rookie year until who knows what. So NFL teams could maybe look for another guard that can make an immediate impact, and we could see his draft stock fall because of that, possibly to day 3. But I think even if Voorhees starts as a backup from the jump, I see this guy having a very quick path to being a starter sooner than later. Negative wise, he's also got short arms, and he kind of struggles against longer defenders who can kind of get their hands on him first. So talent wise, I've got a round 1-2 grade on this guy. But I agree the concerns are that injury. But his power, his size, you look at Landon Dickerson, I like this guy a lot. And if he's there on day 3, what immense value.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that he tore his ACL at the combine, because I think he's definitely going to be there into day 3 just because he's not going to be able to contribute as a rookie. But hopefully he lands in a good spot, and a team is willing to take the long view on that, because I do think he's a good player. But I was surprised that he didn't fall some for you after the injury.
Yep.
Okay, let's roll into round 4 here. Are the 4th guys on our my guys list. For me, it is wide receiver Rashee Rice out of SMU. He is 51st on my big board. He is number 63 overall on the consensus big board. And this is a strange receiver class. It doesn't have the immense top end talent. Obviously, we all like Jackson Smith and Jigba quite a bit, but outside of that, it doesn't have like the elite talent. But there's just a lot of guys in this class that you can get to plug into your system, and it's a lot of slot guys, a lot of smaller guys, and Rice isn't an exception. Although at 204 pounds, he is kind of an exception that he actually weighs over 180 pounds. Not many of these guys do, but he's just sort of average speed, average size. He ran a 4.5 140, which is 51st percentile. His 1.49 10-yard split is 93rd percentile. So he's got good burst. Similarly to what I talked about with Tank Bigsby, he's got really good burst. Not the best top-end speed, but he's an average top-end speed. One of the things I like most about Rice is that he's a really good blocker out on the perimeter, and that's hugely important for me. For receivers, especially if it's not going to be my stud number 1 wide receiver. I need you to be able to block. Now there's consistency issues, and I would honestly probably have him higher if he didn't have issues with some routine drops. Like, he's maddening to watch because he'll make these highlight reel catches, and then it's like, I swear it's like 2 plays later, ball hits him right in the hands and he drops it. So if he can get that consistency, I think he could be a really good player at the next level. It's going to be getting that consistency. And unfortunately, we've seen too many receivers come in with those drop issues, and it just never gets fixed. And so that ultimately kept me from going even higher on Rashee Rice. But I do like the player. I think he's got interesting potential if he can get rid of those concentration drops. Okay, let's go to Mark's number 4 guy. It is offensive tackle Blake Freeland. Mark has him at number 50 on his big board. He is number 73 on our consensus big board. So Mark, talk to me about Blake Freeland.
Yeah, there's definitely a theme with my next 2 of just absolute freak shows. Blake Freeland is 6'8", 310. He had I believe a 9.83 relative athletic score, 10-inch hand, or the size 10 hands, 34-inch long arms. I mean, this guy is just an absolute monster, and he actually tested incredibly well in terms of speed and agility, running a 4.99, and also testing really well in the splits and the shuttle and the 3-cone. He had the greatest vertical in the history of offensive tackles at the combine. Really good broad jump. And obviously, yeah, we're taking him for the traits. This is a project. This is a guy we're putting down the line and hoping that the traits come through. But the funny thing about that is, and it's kind of a theme with my next two guys, is that we're talking about them like they're entirely projects when they're both pretty experienced. And this one, Blake Freeland was the nation's second highest graded tackle this year, behind Notre Dame's Joe Alt, who's expected to be a first-round pick next year. He allowed only 7 combined hurries over the last 2 years. He allowed 0 sacks in 2020, allowed 0 sacks in 2022, and only 1 in 2021. 3 great PFF grades, a 91 PFF grade in 2022, a 90.7 pass blocking grade, 87.9 run blocking grade, really good at both at BYU. He's one of the class's most experienced tackles, 2,690 career snaps, the second most among tackles in this draft. And this is coming from a former converted high school quarterback and tight end. He also was a thunderous dunking high school basketball star, just an absolute beast on the basketball floor. And you saw that in the vertical, with the highest vertical we've ever seen from an offensive tackle. He switched from right tackle to left tackle, showing he can play both. I think he's got really good hand usage in terms of he's got really long arms and he uses them well. He's definitely at his best on the move. It would serve him well to add some muscle to his frame. But we're seeing guys like Mel Kiper put him in the first round now, and people are saying he's climbing up the boards. And I would not be shocked if this was a guy the Eagles looked at and said, put him in Stoutland University with Lane Johnson, and in 2 years, we think we can add 20, 30 pounds and teach him how to play football. And I say teach him how to play football, but, he played pretty well at BYU. So I don't think he's as much of a project as other people think. I know he had his struggles at the Senior Bowl. I know there's reason to be concerned about the frame, but, man, the traits are all there.
All right. Let's go on to Deib's number 4 guy. It is quarterback Tanner McKee out of Stanford. Deibs has him number 50 on his big board. He is number 99 on our consensus big board. Deibs, why do you like a quarterback that can't move?
Exactly. Like if this was the year 2000, Tanner McKee would probably be a first-round lock, right? But this is a guy that was in survival mode in 2022. He had a lot to deal with when it comes to, pass protection. He played behind the 8th lowest graded pass blocking offensive line in the Power 5 last year. This guy's a polished passer, great footwork, great timing, great accuracy. His 2.51 second average time to throw was the second quickest of any quarterback in this draft. So you look at this guy, again, great size, great arm. And I think he's a better prospect than the stats suggest. Let's talk about Hendon Hooker. He had a great season at Tennessee. Some fans are now saying this is a first or second round talent for a guy that's already 25 years old and will be 26 before his rookie season is over. McKee just turned is about to turn 23 years old. I agree, Shane. He's he's a liability when it comes to getting out of the pocket, and he doesn't move well, and that often leads to sacks. But I think McKee could be a great fit for a team that wants to kind of run a throwback passing offense with a lot of play action that already has a really good offensive line. I think what he does really well is he makes really good reads, and I think he throws the ball really well, accurately with anticipation, and he's got a true skill set there. So Tanner McKee, I think, is being slept on.
Yeah, I'm just out on quarterbacks that can't move.
I did my best.
Yeah, you did your best. It was a good argument. I can't call it a convincing argument, but if I'm being honest, I was dug in already. To me, he is a pocket passer with bad pocket presence. He doesn't do a good job of dealing with pressure inside the pocket.
Hold up. No, I'm not going to take this from Mark, who was Carson Strong's biggest fan last year. I will not have it, Mark. I will say. Hey,
first of all, I was way wrong on that. That's a bad take by me. But
sometimes we learn from our mistakes, Deibs.
We learn from our mistakes. Third of all, that guy's knees, I think, are like the worst knees in the history of knees. Like, I think Carson Strong can't walk comfortably. So I still am going to throw that little asterisk on that. But yeah, I did lower him by the time the draft came around. But yeah, it was a bad time.
All right, let's hit our last guys here. For me, it is wide receiver Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. He is number 46 on my big board. He is 65th overall amongst us on our consensus big board. I love Marvin Mims, and I never miss a chance to have some OU bias for sure. But Marvin Mims he's such a good receiver, in my opinion. He does such a good job of tracking the football deep, and he's got such good body control. He had a 51.5% reception rate on deep passes this year. He's got experience as a punt returner. He's got rack ability. You could scheme him touches. You can send him deep on shots. He averaged 20-plus yards per reception in each of the last 2 years with two very different quarterbacks, one right-handed, one left-handed, by the way. So if the Dolphins want to go draft him, he's used to catching passes from a left-handed quarterback. Not that they need another deep threat, but 90th percentile speed. He's undersized, but for this draft class, is 5'11", 183 really that undersized? I mean, that's almost a big receiver in this draft class. So like Jalen Hyatt, he ran in a bit of an offense that doesn't translate real well to the NFL, but I think Marvin Mims is a great example of a guy that you could put in the slot, and you can use him as a vertical threat out of the slot. You can scheme him some touches. You can get him some special teams reps. And I think he can contribute in a lot of ways. And I've got a second-round grade on Mims. I don't think he's going to go in the second round. I think he's going to slip a little further than that. And I think whoever eventually stops his slide is going to get a massively underrated player. Yep. So that's what I've got on Marvin Mims. Mark, you didn't have a comp for Marvin Mims. How dare you? It says, oh wait, I missed it. It says right here, your comp for Marvin Mims was Justin Jefferson / Reggie Wayne /
CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah. All those guys. Okay. Awesome. So Mark loves Marvin Mims. Let's go on.
I did a comp for the relevant players in this draft class. No, I'm joking. I did a comp for my top 60, and then I sprinkled in like outside of that for ones that I already had. But I am writing an article that'll be out on Philly Influencer with player comps, so that'll be out later this week.
All right. I expect the Justin Jefferson / Lynn Swan / insert every good receiver here. So let's go to your last guy, Mark. It is tight end Zach Kuntz out of Old Dominion. He is 60th on your big board, 81st on our consensus big board. It should be no surprise that Mark loves Zach Kuntz because he has a 10.0 relative athletic score. And his comp for Zach Kuntz is Jelani Woods, who prior to last year also had the 10.0 relative athletic score. So Mark loves athletic tight end. And I'm right there with you, but he's higher for you than me. So talk to me about Zach Kuntz.
Yeah, we both loved Jelani Woods last year, and he's very much the Jelani Woods of this year. 6'7", 255, the greatest combine performer of all time. I think they both had a 10, but I'm pretty sure he tested better than Jelani Woods did, I saw people saying. So it was technically like better. I think it was number 1 at the tight end position. Huge hands, long arms, elite bench, elite broad, elite vertical, elite 40, elite splits. This is an absolute unicorn. He's the Tariq Woolen of this draft, even beyond the Jelani Woods of this draft, in my opinion. But even if he's a raw project, he checks every box physically and athletically. And just like Freeland, I don't know how raw Kuntz is. Like this, there's a chance that we're overselling how raw Kuntz is as a prospect. And I understand Old Dominion, so it skews things a little bit. But he only played 5 games this year at Old Dominion, and he was disappointing. He caught 12 of his 28 targets. He had a bad quarterback, but he showed tremendous upside in 2021. And that's why I'm saying we don't know how raw he is, because 2021, he had 73 catches for 112 targets for almost 700 yards and 5 touchdowns, where he was almost the focal point of the entire offense. He plays more like a big receiver than a tight end, which is interesting to say about a guy who's 6'7", 255. And when you watch him run, it's not like you're like, oh, that guy's a tight end. You're like, oh, that guy's a receiver. That's how fast this guy is at that speed, or at that size, I should say. Old Dominion had Kuntz lined up all over the field. They even put him in the slot. They put him out wide. They put him at tight end. They put him at Y, at F. He's not going to make you miss, but he will run you over. So I think Zach Kuntz is a really, really interesting prospect.
Yeah, he bumped Jelani Woods down to a 9.99 relative athletics score. So that's the way the relative athletics score can only have one 10.0. So like it raises the scale whenever there's a new most athletic and it'll recalculate. So he edged him out by 0.01. But yeah, I love Zach Kuntz. I think he's a good route runner, surprisingly so. And so I think that he's not a good blocker. But I think he can immediately come in and be a receiving threat for you. I think I'm with you. I think we're overselling a little bit how raw he might be.
Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, let's throw it here to Deibs for his last guy. It is defensive back Chris Smith II out of Georgia. Deibs, you have him 53rd on your big board. He is number 100 on our consensus big board. Talk to me about Chris Smith.
Yeah, I've always been really high on this dude. Really good at pretty much all facets. Plays with a lot of moxie, plays with a lot of confidence. His versatility and leadership, stand out. He was a captain and key guy for Georgia's two historically dominant defenses. Georgia used Chris Smith in a lot of different ways, playing deep, moving into the box, playing in the slot. I think he can cover ground really quickly, but his physicality and willingness as a tackler really lets him dominate in the box at the line of scrimmage. He can read route combinations in front of him and react in a flash. Over the past two seasons, he's allowed 38 of 60 targets his way to be completed for just 341 yards and 2 touchdowns compared to his 6 interceptions. He's got some missed tackles on film for sure. I love his aggressive mindset, but sometimes he does come a little too hot. He missed 11 tackles in 2022, and he's got a 15.1% miss rate. He showed up at the combine weighing 192 pounds and then ran a 4.62 in the 40. That killed his draft stock for sure. I believe he plays faster than that. I see Chris Smith as a high floor safety prospect that probably should be drafted on day 2. This guy's just a football player, and I think he's one of the more complete safeties and best football players in this class. If he could become a little bit more reliable as a tackler, I think the sky's the limit. I don't understand, like my other guys on this list, why people are sleeping on Chris Smith after doing it at such a high level again and again and again for Georgia.
Yeah, I think that his combine performance really, really hurt him. The 2.77 relative athletic score, and safety is one of those positions where athleticism may not matter as much as it used to, as teams are starting to go to more split field looks. It doesn't require that center field speed, but that's concerning for him. And I think a lot of teams probably they have certain thresholds you have to hit. And I would not be surprised if a lot of teams took him off of their board at that point. And he may slide. And I'm with you. Like if he just tested poorly, if he can, work on his technique and some of those things, like he could still be a good player, and he might be a really good value for somebody as he starts to slide down the board there.
Yeah, for me, it's strictly combine. It was literally all combine. I was watching the combine during my radio show, and I looked at my producer and I went, oh, this guy's supposed to be really good, Chris Smith. And then he ran the slowest 40 I've ever seen in my life. I know it was a 4.62 or whatever, but I remember watching it live. I was like, this is the slowest person I've ever seen move in my entire life. So I was just so shocked because I remember watching him on tape. I agree he doesn't play that slow, but the combine just scared me straight, to be quite honest.
All right. And that is going to do it. That is the My Guys episode of the draft. 5 guys for each of us that we're considerably higher on than the consensus amongst the 3 of us. Mark, what do you have?
I have a surprise for the listeners that I'm also going to surprise the 2 co-hosts on here.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about who we're high on. Let's air out the dirty laundry. Let's talk about who we're low on. Honorable mention here. I'm just going to throw it out. Shane's 5 guys that he's the most out on statistically compared to me and Deibs. Tight end Michael Mayer.
Wow.
Tackle Cody Mock. Wide receiver Josh Downs. Tackle Darnell Wright. And his number 1 player that he's most out on, he can correct me if he wants, but it's Jalen Hyatt, who we had at 52. Dibes, his five guys.
Hold on.
Those are all strong guys.
Point of order. I have Michael Mayer with a first-round grade. How is he one of the guys I'm the most out on? He's like number 26 on my big board.
27. But he was 27 on the big board. Dibes has him 13. I have him 17. So there's a gap there in the consensus. Also for Shane, it was a little harder to find guys he was like more out on. With me and Dibes, we have guys ranked pretty surprisingly low compared to consensus. Shane, it was hard to find a fifth guy. So you not having Mayer at tight end 1 kind of is what made me put him on there for you. But Dibes, the 5 guys Dibes is most out on. We have wide receiver Jordan Addison, tight end Darnell Washington, cornerback Deonte Banks, safety Antonio Johnson, and the guy he's most out on in the entire class is quarterback Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And then my 5 guys I'm out on is edge Nolan Smith, defensive tackle Brian Brzee, offensive tackle Anton Harrison, edge BJ Ujulari, and then the number 1 guy I'm most out on in the entire draft class, and this should come at no surprise to anybody, is quarterback Will Levis.
All right. Yeah,
he's getting considerable number 2 buzz right now.
Yeah.
You want to see a reaction on a live draft show. If Will Levis goes second, there will be one from me.
Mark is going to be
favorite right now.
Mark's going to be really upset because Nolan Smith is one of the guys he's most out on, and I think he's one of the more likely picks for the Eagles at 10. I did my mock draft though, how things would go if I was the GM of every team, and he went number 29 to the Saints, and I had a Saints fan. It's like, oh, that would be terrible if we got Nolan Smith. As like, dude, Nolan Smith's probably going in the top 10. You would be thrilled if you got him at 29.
I think he's going in that mid-teens area. Like, I think Green Bay at 13 makes a lot of sense now. Like, he's a Green Bay type guy. So I think he goes in that teens. And by the way, like I'm saying, I'm out on Nolan Smith. The other 4 I'm really out on. Brzee, Levis, Harrison, and Ojulari, I'm pretty out on. Smith, I have at 29. It's just relative to you guys. You guys have him both, I think, around 15-ish. So it just pushed him. The consensus there means I'm pretty low comparatively. I mean, if the Eagles took him 10th, I'd be upset compared to the other options available, but it's something I could pretty easily talk myself into. I just don't know about the immediate contribution.
No question, a better draft pick than Lucas Van Ness. No question.
I would rather Van Ness.
No, absolutely not.
Boo.
Eagles
you can
Twitter
send your hate mail at Mark Henry Jr. _ on Twitter. He wants the Eagles to draft Lucas Van Ness. He wants them to trade up for him, is what I just heard.
That's not what I said. I like him at 30.
Like him at 30. I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it has been a fun draft season. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to our positional breakdowns, our My Guys stuff. If you have, be sure you follow these guys on Twitter. They put out a lot of great stuff on different places. I'm going to get them back on here next week, and we'll break down everything the Eagles did in the draft. So we're going to see you guys on the other side of the draft. But before we get out of here, Dibes, I'll throw it to you first. Do you have any final thoughts? Any last-second draft takes you need to throw out there? The floor is yours.
Final thoughts. Number 10 for the Eagles, I'm looking at defensive line. If my guys aren't there, I trade back. That is my mindset. Has been for a while. Jalen Carter, if he's there, I'm taking him and celebrating. But Miles Murphy, Tyree Wilson, those guys, if they're not there, trade back. And then there's a lot of different possibilities available for the Eagles. But that's my mindset right now.
All right, Mark, any final thoughts? Any last draft takes you need to fire off?
Yeah, I mean, I'm similar boat as Dibes. Give me Murphy, give me Tyree Wilson, Jalen Carter. I'll throw in Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's definitely, he's in that group. There's only 5 guys that would excite me at 10. It's those 4 and Will Anderson. Will Anderson's not going to be there. So it comes down to Murphy, Wilson, JSN, or Jalen Carter. If they're not there, or you're not going to take one of them, trade back. And my ultimate prediction would be that the Eagles trade back to about 17 to 20, something in that range, and they either take Miles Murphy or Bijan Robinson.
All right, I have two takes to fire off here at the end, and Mark's not going to like either of them. So I'm just going to say him, mute him, and then end the show. The first one is I think the Eagles are taking an offensive tackle with their first pick. I think that's the direction they're going to go.
Absolutely
not necessarily what I would do. I think that's what they're going to do.
It's definitely possible.
It's definitely possible. Nobody likes to build through the trenches like the Eagles. My second take, and Mark will love this one too. This one's a little bit in jest, but just got to get Mark riled up one more time. There's going to be a good wide receiver from Tennessee that comes out of this draft, and his name is Cedric Tillman. Cedric Tillman is going to outperform Jalen Hyatt in the NFL.
No, he won't.
Well, that's a take. That's a take. But wait, I'm curious. I'm not the highest on Tillman?
I'm honestly not sure. I like Tillman quite a bit. Let's see. You actually are. You're actually higher on Tillman than I am. You have him at 68. I've got him at 75. But I like Tillman quite a bit. Kind of a big-bodied receiver in a class that doesn't have a lot. And I just thought I could throw a little more shade at Jalen Hyatt just as a parting shot here to Mark.
He reminds me of Corey Davis, the good version, like 2018, 2019, 2020 Corey Davis, not like current Corey Davis, but he definitely reminds me of him. And by the way, Deibs mentioned the Hendon Hooker slander earlier, so I'll just add, we're just firing takes off at this point. But I'll just add in some Hendon Hooker slander. He is a total system and wide receiver merchant. Like, he had Jalen Hyatt and Cedric Tillman running around out there with one of the best play callers in the sport. If you take Hendon Hooker in the first round, you have certifiable donkey brains.
Hendon Hooker's going in the first round. There is no doubt in my mind.
I don't think GMs are this stupid. They can't be this stupid, Shane.
I don't know. I would not in a million years do it, but I think he's going to. I've got a third round grade on Hendon Hooker.
Same.
So, all right. Anybody else? Any other last takes you need to fire off before we ride off into the sunset?
Eagles should 1,000% not draft Bijan Robinson at number 10. That should not be a move for the Eagles, and I'm gonna die on that hill. I think people, as we get closer to the draft, are starting to kind of sell themselves to the idea of Bijan Robinson and a running back. That's what we're doing here, and it is just wrong thinking for what the Eagles do. What prospects are available on day 2, value-wise. I get it would be so much fun. Don't get me wrong. The first 2-3 years would be a blast. But I, for the life of me, refuse to believe how he's going to suddenly change his mentality and go win now in this draft. That is not going to happen. Howie would rather trade back and accumulate assets and get like a future first-round pick than draft Bijan Robinson.
One last take.
Mark.
I've said this before. Howie Roseman loves drafting receivers. Nick Sirianni's a former receiver. He's a former wide receivers coach. The Eagles will take a receiver either at 30 or 62.
All right. There you have it, folks. We're going to end it right there. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, following along with the BGN Draft Show this offseason. It's been our pleasure to break down these players for you guys. I hope you have enjoyed the content. I hope you can wow everybody you watch the draft with all the knowledge you gained on the BGN Draft Show. Keep it tuned right here to the BGN Draft feed, or the BGN radio feed, excuse me. There's going to be a lot of content pumping out over the rest of this week, getting you ready for the draft, reaction shows to the draft, and in the weeks to come as we break down everything that happens. So keep it tuned right here. Like, rate, subscribe, review, all of those things. We really appreciate it. It helps us get the show out there. And so for the last time before the draft, I'm going to sign off by saying, go Birds.